2, 1, 2. Let's make sure that we are good light-wise. We still have a good amount of natural light coming in from the outside, so I think we're clear. We don't need to put on this blinding thing right here. Nope. I think we are good. Okay. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. Let's see. We have a lot to get to, and you know, it's funny when I prepare kind of like the docket in terms of the different topics that I want to talk about. I try not to be overly cognizant of, are there any big names on the rundown, right? Because if you're talking like Andrade versus Alim Kanuli or something, that's not going to ring name-wise the same that, oh, Canelo this, or Tyson Fury that, Anthony Joshua that, Floyd Mayweather speaks on Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia. And so I really do try to mix it up where we are properly addressing even some of the highly skilled fights that might not feature the biggest names, or some of the stories that are divisionally important, but might not feature the biggest names. One of the things that I like about just kind of the plethora of YouTube channels out there and different forms of media. I mean, I like how DAZN is handling their boxing programming, where you've got Ak and Barak, but then you've got Tony Bellew and what's the brother's name? I was actually just talking with them on Twitter last week. Oladipo. They do their thing on DAZN. Chris Mannix and Sergio Mora do their thing on DAZN. So, and then obviously on ESPN, you've got the State of Boxing with Kriegel and Andre Ward, Timothy Bradley. And you have Max on boxing. I wish Max Kellerman was able to spend more time on boxing. I mean, he's obviously been a devoted fan for decades, but he's just pulled in so many different directions where he's covering NBA, NFL. So you might get one episode of Max on boxing a month, if you're lucky. I mean, I've seen him go multiple months without one episode of Max on boxing. But yeah, I mean, I like seeing as much boxing media as possible because, I mean, it's such a difficult sport, and it just is so unfortunate when you see people go their whole career and sometimes they'll, win a belt, or become a champion and so forth, and still won't really make out tremendously financially. It's just it's a smaller overall market than some of the other major sports. I mean, certainly in the U.S., people will talk about why certain fighters are or are not popular. And one of the things that you have to point to initially, if you're talking about an American fighter, why aren't they more popular? It's just not one of the major sports here. I mean, in a lot of cases, you could argue that the UFC, not so much Bellator, but the UFC has, in terms of casual fandom that will tune in on the weekend to watch the action, UFC has a larger audience on average than a lot of the boxing cards. And sometimes it's because every UFC event is going to be on ESPN, where if you're getting into boxing, you either subscribe to DAZN, you stream the stuff if you have to, you either have Showtime. It's not as it's not as democratic in terms of making sure that everybody has access to the competitions, unless you're top rank and they have to deal with ESPN. Tech Lid Bull, what's going on? Oh man, yeah, we're gonna get into that Dogboe fight. He did fight his heart out. It's almost a little tough to watch with Dogboe sometimes. I feel like ever since those two Navarrete fights, I'm watching Dogboe fights like the one against Pitbull, and he won that, or not Pitbull, but Blue Nose, right? Adam Lopez, when he won that fight. I'm watching that, and I see Dogboe's energy level start to wane in like the middle rounds, and then he starts getting hit. Then you start seeing him backed up into the ropes, and I'm just thinking, oh God, it just feels like the writing's on the wall here. I know where this is headed, and you get the impression that Dogboe is also very aware of where this is headed. So the fact that he was able to dig that deep and pull that out against Joet Gonzalez, very, very good contender. I was super impressed. You know, in my preview, I actually had that as resulting in a draw. That's what I thought was going to happen, and it wasn't too far off. That felt, you know, watching that fight, it felt like a draw. Yeah, he's a war waiting to happen. And the thing is, it seemed like his punching power was carrying a lot more at 122. You know, when he was stopping Magdaleno, and when he was, and even in his fights before that, it seemed like he was able to hurt the opponents a lot more. Now he's using his, you know, speed and landing quality punches, but it seems like as soon as it clicks for his opponent that, hey, if I walk Isaac Dogboe down and start applying the pressure, he's not going to be able to keep up at this pace. And, you know, they were obviously talking extensively about that on the broadcast, you know, Andre Ward and company. But when Dogboe is starting to get backed up and hurt, hey, what's going on? Hot Facts with Robert Reese in the house. Yeah, we just chopped it up about 10 minutes ago. What's up, Rob? You know, Dogboe is able to kind of, not, I wouldn't say kick it into a higher gear, because he's clearly, it looks like he's fighting for his life in there. And we've seen that with several Dogboe fights now, but he got the favorable scorecard in this instance. It felt like it could have gone either way, but man, he really had to. I just saw Navarrete, I saw Adam Lopez, I saw that same pattern just developing over and over again. But Joey Gonzalez, I'm sure he felt like he could have done a lot more. Stan Tucker, a.k.a. Dad, in the house. What's going on? Jay Foreman, thank you for stopping by once again. How you doing? Yeah, Dwyer gets them wrong sometimes. Dwyer gets them wrong pretty often, but you know what? It's funny. I started watching the Dwyer prediction on Dogboe versus Joey Gonzalez, or at the time it was billed Joey Gonzalez versus Dogboe. I was actually just getting into that video as the broadcast was just getting started, so I didn't make it through the whole video. Did he say that Dogboe was going to be able to pull out a close decision victory? Again, I thought this one was going to be a draw. Brendan Jackson, salute. What's going on? Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, Dwyer gets him wrong a lot, but sometimes he just, you know, gets it perfectly. One of the ones that I remember him guessing right was Tyson Fury versus Vladimir Klitschko. A lot of people thought he was crazy when he said that Tyson Fury's going to pull this off, because, you know, Vladimir Klitschko was like a decade-long dominator of the division. The only reason he really wasn't undisputed was because his brother Vitaly, or Vitali, however you choose to pronounce it, was often holding that other belt. He would always be that WBC belt, and then Vladimir would usually hold the WBA, IBF, and WBO. But yeah, Dwyer called that one correctly. But yeah, I thought that was a very entertaining fight, and I knew that it was going to be. I thought that Joey Gonzalez, usually a pretty slow starter, was going to get, you know, outboxed and just kind of speeded, for lack of a better term, by Dogboe, who's, you know, moving around the ring well and then launching into his attacks. But then you watch his legs and you think that type of movement isn't sustainable against a patient pressure fighter like Joey Gonzalez. Now, Joey Gonzalez, again, sometimes he takes a little too long to get cooking. By the time he starts getting going, he could be down, you know, 3 rounds or so. So it's like you've got to win just about every round beyond that point to secure the victory. And what my suspicion was that it was going to click with Joey Gonzalez that, okay, if I really start working against Dogboe, I'm going to start developing an edge here. But then I thought that Dogboe in that final, you know, 5 rounds would be able to win 1 or 2 rounds. Even as he started losing even as it looked like it was starting to go downhill for him, he would still be able to dig deep and pull out a round or 2, even when it seemed like he was losing the fight. And yeah, but it could have gone one way this way or one way the other way. And I actually want to talk a little bit about the division that they're in, because this makes things a little bit interesting. Because first off, it looks like, oh, we got a lot of people. Yeah, okay. TJ, what's going on? Thanks for coming through. Yeah, Joet had that fight 96-94. So Joet had it slightly in his favor, right? So TJ, you thought that Joet Gonzalez, oh, you said Joet had that fight. Should have won that fight 96-94. Got you. Yeah, I thought it could have gone that way. I thought it could have been a draw. I thought it could have gone 1 round to Dogboe. Something was telling me that they might have given Dogboe the decision, and I was thinking if they gave Dogboe, like, say, the first 3 rounds, then you could definitely see how him just winning a couple rounds, well, no, he would technically need 3 between rounds 4 and 10. It's tough because there were a couple swing rounds in there. You said a draw at worst. It depends on how much you make out of the ring generalship. Like, you know how Dogboe kind of looks like he's fighting with his back against the wall? So if you place a premium on backing Dogboe up to where he's looking like that, then there are a couple more rounds you could have given Joet Gonzalez, rather than if you place a premium or don't place a premium on Dogboe getting backed up, but instead start looking at when he is throwing punches, if he might have a slightly higher connect percentage, then you could conceivably give Dogboe 1 or a couple of those swing rounds. Franco H in the house. Heck yeah, thanks for stopping by. Growth through calisthenics, what's going on? Benjamin Tucker. Benji and Brexley in the house. What's going on, family? Yeah, neither Dogboe nor Joet could beat Vargas. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think either one of them could beat Ray Vargas. And it sounded like, because I was looking at the rankings on Boxing Scene, and it looks like they had like Joet Gonzalez and Dogboe number 1 and 2 for the WBO. But it sounded like on the broadcast they were saying that Dogboe is now the mandatory for the WBC. But when I was looking at the top ranked contenders on Boxing Scene for the WBC, it looked like they had they had a different, they didn't have Joet Gonzalez nor Isaac Dogboe. So I was thinking, well, first of all, you know who the WBO champ is in that division, right? Emmanuel Navarrete. So it's like, if you're Dogboe and you now become the WBO mandatory, it's almost like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Because again, he got destroyed via decision in that first fight, got stopped. And he got stopped in the last round too. That makes it like worse, right? You sustain the beatdown, you're hanging in there, trying to like scratch and claw to keep in the fight as this guy who looks like he could just throw like 100 punches around in his sleep in Navarrete. And he's got the reach advantage and height advantage. He's got abnormally long arms for his division. Look that up. I think he's like got a 73 or 72 inch reach, closer to like Crawford, Spence like reaches versus what you normally see in a featherweight. But if Dogboe's now the WBO contender, yeah, thank you, but no thank you. But yeah, it says that the WBC number 1 contenders were like Gary Russell Jr., Brandon Figueroa, and then Joet Gonzalez and Isaac Dogboe. So unless Figueroa and, unless he's able to sidestep or somehow Gary Russell Jr. can't, activate his, number 1 contender status, it would be interesting to see Isaac Dogboe now leap from number 5 to number 1 and take that shot against Ray Vargas. Plus, I don't know if Dogboe is exclusively signed to Top Rank. I know that he fights on Top Rank pretty often. But how do they even make that match between PBC with Ray Vargas and Top Rank and Isaac Dogboe? I usually start there when it's like, okay, this fight looks like it could be shaping up. Okay, let's look at the promotions. And, I think we talked at great length about that last week. And I just don't see how they do Vargas Dogboe right now. But I would like to see it. I just think that Ray Vargas pulls it off. I would love to see Dogboe versus Josh Warrington. I know Josh Warrington's the IBF champion right now. And it always struck me as odd that Josh Warrington, after getting knocked out cold by Mauricio Lara and then kind of headbutting Lara in the rematch in the second round, they had to call that fight early because he split Lara's head. They, instead of running it back like a third time, somehow Josh Warrington was able to slide into the number 1 contender slot for the IBF and fight Kiko Martinez. Like, Kiko Martinez was the worst of those champions. Like, Gary Russell Jr. easily dominated and then stopped Kiko Martinez. A lot of people have beaten Kiko Martinez. But Zelfa Barrett recently, less than 2 years ago, Zelfa Barrett beat Kiko Martinez. But for Josh Warrington to get that opportunity, it was almost like the biggest favor the IBF could have done for him. Now, granted, Warrington is the former IBF champion, and he never lost that belt in the ring. He was stripped because he didn't want to fight like Kid Galahad a second time. He already defended his title successfully against Galahad. I think they asked him to defend it against him again. He said no, he wants to start making bigger fights, and then he got knocked out by then no-name Mauricio Lara, right? So once Kiko Martinez beat Kid Galahad, because Galahad fought like Jazza Dickens for the vacant IBF title, which you wonder, how is Jazza Dickens fighting for a vacant belt anywhere in the featherweight division? It's always weird. You get those scenarios. But when Kid Galahad beat Jazza Dickens, and then Kiko Martinez beat Galahad to take the IBF title, you know the line had to be like out the store of people who say, I want that shot. You know, no, I don't want to fight Navarrete for that WBO belt. And, you know, whatever you think about Leo Santa Cruz still being super champion or Lee Wood having the lesser belt, it looks like they're about to fight, which I'm happy with. WBA, let's line up for that Kiko Martinez shot. That's about as favorable as fighting for a vacant title, right? But yeah, Josh Warrington was blessed with that opportunity. Let's see. Navarrete's going to 130. So, yeah, I saw him, you know, they were talking about Oscar Valdez against Navarrete. But Navarrete's next fight, because I think that there was something either close to being done or I don't think it was official yet, but it looks like Navarrete has his next fight lined up. And is that that's a title defense, right, of his featherweight belt. I don't think that this fight that he has lined up is at 130. Let me know if I'm wrong, but to me, he is currently the best fighter at featherweight. I just want to see them settle the score between him and Ray Vargas, and then Gary Russell Jr. against somebody. I just want to see, well, I want to see Russell get his career back on track. But you have other interesting players in the division as well. You know, you've got Robeisy Ramirez, who also fights on Top Rank, along with Joet Gonzalez and Isaac Dogboe. Like, I think Dogboe versus Robeisy Ramirez would be an interesting fight. I don't know if Dogboe wants that fight, but I would like to see Robeisy, the super skilled, up and comer, out of Cuba. I'd like to see him fight Isaac Dogboe. But Mauricio Lara, I want to see him return to the ring. He beat, I think, Emilio Sanchez in his last fight, which was just as riveting a knockout as his knockout of Josh Warrington. Like, to me, Mauricio Lara, he's must watch right now. He's a little bit like Ricardo Mayorga. I think I saw, somebody likening Jaime Munguia to Mayorga. To me, there's something about Mauricio Lara that's a little bit like that too. He's almost willing to get hit a couple times to let his punches go. Let's see. Everyone already knows this, but the rankings are a joke, Jay Foreman. Yeah, absolutely. The WBC has Wilder ranked number 1 and AJ not ranked in the top 15. So I think what happens with that is that the fighter actually has to petition and apply with the sanctioning body for you to be in their, on their grid, on their radar, for you to even be ranked. For instance, like Gary Russell Jr., longtime WBC champ, he's not ranked anywhere in the IBF, WBA, WBO. I think it's as simple as putting a petition in to that sanctioning body so you could then become a part of their ranking systems, which you would think a fighter should be firing his manager if he's not petitioned in each and every one of those every one of those sanctioning bodies. Because there's really no excuse for it. I get that there are fees involved when you fight, but you usually just have to pay more when you're the champion holding that belt. But yeah, it's just the business needs help. The business of boxing needs a lot of tweaking. Yeah, Kiko did smoke Kid Galahad. Yeah, TJ, that was a brilliant knockout. And Kiko does have a puncher's chance in just about, every fight that he's in. It's just that when Kiko, and largely it's because of I think it's because of his height and because he's not that fast with his feet. He used to be a little bit quicker, but when he seems to be getting outboxed or outclassed, it just looks really bad when Kiko's getting beat. Granted, it looked bad for Kid Galahad when Kiko knocked him out. But when you see Kiko get beat, it's almost like you almost can't even picture him being a top 5 guy in the division, to me at least. What's next for Caleb Plant? Fins 1993. What's going on? Caleb Plant, it's frustrating because, I was frustrated with Caleb Plant before he got that shot against Canelo, because you saw the way that he was handling his fight-by-fight schedule. He would be the IBF champion, right? And he won it against a pretty decent fighter, Uzcata guy, who hasn't looked great since. But Caleb Plant fought like a guy named Feigenbutz, Mike Lee, and then Caleb Truax. That was his title run. That's how he defended his belt 3 times. So he wasn't fighting any tough opponents while he had the belt. And then he gets like the Canelo lottery. He just happened to be the right guy holding the right belt at the right time while Canelo was storming the division. But all this talk that I hear from Caleb Plant, and I like Caleb Plant's style. I remember watching him earn the belt against Uzcata guy. I'm like, damn, this guy is such a good, sweet science technician. But when I hear him talking trash against, about David Benavidez, or talking trash about any one of these guys, or talking about how good he is and how much he wants to just prove that he's the best in the division, it's almost like it's just noise to me. I can't take it too seriously because you don't see the fights getting scheduled. Now, he has recently said that when he does schedule his next fight, he's going to explain what's been going on. And I think, or I suspect, that it's been an injury to Caleb Plant. I think that there's been some sort of nagging injury. Maybe it's just been undisclosed. That's been keeping him from scheduling his next fight, basically, right? He hasn't fought since November of 2021. So, but even with that, I don't expect his next fight to be against David Benavidez, even though that would be the most appropriate matchup in my book. I mean, mostly because they've been talking trash. They're both without a belt. David Benavidez deserves a title shot. He's a 2-time WBC champion, and neither time did he lose the belt in the ring. He just got stripped twice for different non-boxing related reasons. Seaweave Lyrical in the house. What's going on? Brandon Jackson in the house. T Smack in the house. Heck yeah. What's cracking? Nadia Inoue. Brandon Jackson says, I can't wait for Inoue to storm through 122, 126. It always sounds like it's a foregone conclusion, but I always pump my brakes when I think that somebody's gonna is just gonna have their way with the next division up. Now, in a way, to what you're saying, he does look like he's special enough to pull something like that off. It's just that when you look at the styles of fighters there, now Brandon Figueroa isn't there anymore, so he won't have to worry about him, at least not at 122. At 122, he would have to worry about, Stephen Fulton, Angelo Leo. And does his skill set, given his height, his reach, and his fight style, does it seem like it translates or can easily be portable and move up a division? It remains to be, seen, but I think that he's got the goods where his chances are about as good as any's, you would think. EK, what's going on? Thanks for coming through. Seaweave Lyrical, by the way, had a pretty funny comment. You could copy the same comment in there if you like, but it was, I forgot what we were talking about. But I just remember laughing earlier today at a comment that he left pertaining to one of the fights. Oh, it was about Adam Kownacki, who, we're going to get into his upcoming fight this weekend against Demirizin. But Kownacki was on the Mannix podcast, and he said that he's going to kind of, he just got stopped twice against Robert Helenius. He basically went from being an undefeated heavyweight who was essentially one of the next in line for Deontay Wilder's, then champion, Deontay Wilder's WBC title. But then he gets stopped by the 6'7" Robert Helenius twice, which makes you wonder how he was going to do against, Deontay Wilder, right? But Adam Kownacki throws a lot of volume, hits pretty hard, pressure fighter, but he doesn't move his head. He moves his feet forward, but not laterally, nothing like that. And he's beaten some pretty decent fighters. He's beaten Charles Martin. He stopped Gerald Washington, but he hasn't moved his head off the center line in years. Chris Arreola, they ended up, setting the record for the most punches thrown and punches landed in a heavyweight fight. And, granted, 60% of the punches landed were coming from Kownacki, and he won that fight like 9 rounds to 3, but he was still getting hit a ton. So it wasn't so much a matter of if, it was a matter of when that style runs out. And it just happened to be in those 2 fights against Robert Helenius. So yeah, Seaweed Lyrical basically said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, no one believes you when you say that you're gonna start moving your head and doing all this sweet science stuff. He basically said, nah, bruh, I don't think that you're just gonna like reinvent yourself suddenly in these next fights. No, and I agree with that. He's gonna come in and it's gonna end up being a bit of a slop fest, and they're just gonna start hitting each other. I actually think that Demirizin, his opponent, is more sweet science style than Konachki, but I do suspect that Konachki will pressure him and break him down. And I don't mean break him down as in stop him. I just think he's just gonna land more punches and win a decision. That's how I see it going. But I could also, I don't think it's as likely, but I could also see Adam Konachki getting stopped by Demirizin, because if he is a shot fighter, which again I cannot overstate how brutal his last 3 fights were, starting with the Areola one, not nearly as brutal as those 2 against Helenius, and the second against Helenius, you could argue, was worse than the first. So who knows how much Konachki there is left, but we'll find out on Saturday. Some people thought Canelo was going to take, Jay Foreman said, some people thought Canelo was going to take 175 easily, and look what happened. I never thought it was going to be done that easily. But yeah, most people thought that he was going to beat Dimitri Bivol. I thought that Dimitri Bivol was going to lose via suspect decision. I thought it was going to be a controversial type of fight where half of the audience or more thought that Bivol might have edged it, but they gave it to Canelo. Shoot, and that, it wasn't too far from happening. When you think about that fight, Bivol versus Canelo, and then you think that there were 3 115 to 113 scorecards, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, if Bivol didn't finish the fight strong, it's a draw. Think about that. If he didn't finish strong in the 12th round and he started moving around the ring saying, basically, I got this, it's already wrapped up, he fights to a draw. That would have just been a travesty. And boxing came this close to embarrassing itself. Yeah, EK, Charles Martin, the man who walks this earth like this, who's going to get knocked out. Yeah, Charles Martin's an interesting figure. Interesting figure. He had a bravado about him where I actually kind of thought before, because this is when he was still undefeated, I think, before he fought Anthony Joshua, I was listening to him in the interviews, kind of hearing about his backstory from a tough part of town. Where is he from? Either St. Louis or Kansas City. And I saw how he carried himself. I'm like, dang, this guy might be a problem for Joshua. Ended up not being, but yeah, very, very interesting fighter. And, he was doing well against Luis Ortiz until he got hit. And then he got lost in the ring. One of the more bizarre knockouts you'll see. Luis Ortiz, by the way, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, about to fight Andy Ruiz. Can't wait for that one. Canelo's giving me Teofimo vibes when Teo fought George. EK, do you think that Canelo seems a little bit delusional in the way that he's talking about the fight against Bivol? Because to me, well, in the interviews that I've heard, he doesn't sound like he's going overboard in saying that he deserved a win in that fight. He more or less just acknowledges that he's mad. That's what I've heard. Like, he's pissed off and he's hurt. He's used those words, like hurt and pissed, that he lost those fights and that he wants to fight him again. Teofimo struck me as being delusional. For multiple to me, Teofimo sounded a little more Deontay Wilder-like after that rematch. Not the third fight, but the second fight with Tyson Fury. To me, that's where Teofimo started trending in the narrative that he was developing for himself, or at least within himself. Brendan Jackson says, Canelo definitely was headhunting and not mixing it up intelligently versus Bivol. Reminded me of Lara versus Canelo, just actually way less competitive. Yeah, Canelo, it seemed like there was a point in the fight where Canelo realized that he didn't have the legs to hang with Bivol. And I think that it was when we started seeing him kind of lean up against the ropes and kind of invite him on. And then around the same time, Dimitri Bivol said, okay, and started letting like 6 to 8 punch combinations go, kind of unanswered, which was weird to see. That was a little bit jarring. That's where I'm sure many people were like, oh, this isn't just Canelo, losing a couple of the early rounds here. Canelo doesn't seem to have that next gear to hit because Bivol is so on point with his movement, his jab, and his selection of power punching. You know, when he decides to throw combinations, he he puts it together really well, and then he moves laterally. A lot of people just back straight up, and Dimitri Bivol was moving intelligently. And I think Canelo knew by like midway into the fight, like, ooh, like this is not going how I planned, and I don't know if I could do much about it. He started really loading up on single shots. Let's see. T-Smack, Crawford beats Smets. You know, T-Smack, what's going on? Like, I can't wait for... I almost don't even want to talk Crawford Spence because, look, I don't know if you guys pay attention to some of the other channels that will talk a lot about, and they're channels that I watch, but they'll get into, like, the rumors that are going on. Like, hey, so-and-so just tweeted this, so does that mean this and this and this? I don't like speculating too much on what is not, what's not official. And I'm seeing different theories that Spence might be fighting Keith Thurman or something crazy. So I almost feel like letting that one go until we get hit with some good news. Like, remember how you might have felt when you saw the flyer and the announcement? Because PBC likes to keep it close to the vest, and then they'll come out with the announcement, right? And they'll usually have their flyer ready when they announce it. When they announce Spence versus Pacquiao, or Pacquiao versus Spence, you could say, even though Spence held the belts, but Pacquiao is like a legend. Sometimes that supersedes all else. But when they announced that one, I was so thrilled. I want to get that feeling again, and I hope I'm wrong, because I almost don't think that the fight's getting made. I feel like there's a higher likelihood that gets made than Tank versus Ryan Garcia. But I'm starting to really wonder. But then again, if the fight's taking place in November, then it might make sense that they don't announce it until maybe early October, or maybe at the very end of this month. So, well, no, we're not even in August yet. Yeah, they might wait another couple weeks before they announce it, even if it is a done deal, because you don't want to 3 months worth of waiting time. You want maybe 2 months, that sweet spot. I suspect that's why there hasn't been anything announced, and that I'm hoping that that's the case. But I also saw that, Crawford wants 50-50 and Spence doesn't want to give him that, so let's let them handle all that stuff. I don't want to speculate on whether Crawford deserves 50-50 or 60-40 or any of that stuff. They just need to get that fight made, and if it doesn't get made, it's going to be it's going to be a stain on both of their legacies, seriously. Who lost worse? T-Smack asked. AJ to Usyk or Canelo to Bivol? I'd say Canelo lost by a wider margin, but AJ might have still lost worse because of the dire straits that he found himself in the final round. That fight looked like if it was a 15-rounder or even a 13-rounder, that Usyk might stop AJ. Like, if that was happening in the 7th round, the ref, the ref would have been looking in, thinking about stopping the fight. He looked defenseless. He was just putting his hands up. He was just spent. So I would say AJ's loss to Usyk was worse. Basso Man. And let me know if it's Basso Man. Let me know if it's Bass or Basso Man. What's going on? Yeah, thank you. Seaweave Lyrical said, I think they'll announce Bud versus Spence in late August for the fight to be in November. Yeah, I think that something like that would make sense. Even though if they announce it in late August, that still gives it a 3 months of building time, which a fight like that deserves that sort of lead time. And let me know if you guys hear any whistling. I don't know if there's a plumbing issue nearby, but let me know if that's a distraction. But yeah, okay, so I wanted to get into some quick boxing news, some fights that were recently made. Andrade, ordered, not official, but the WBO ordered Demetrius Andrade versus Janibek Alimkhanuly. Andrade can't catch a break, can he? Like, they're gonna order basically the boogeyman of the division and be like, hey, why don't you take on that guy? No Charlo doesn't want to fight you. No Triple G doesn't want to fight you. Munguia doesn't want to fight you. None of these guys want to fight, but take on Janibek Alimkhanuly. And it's so messed up. That would just be the latest in several title defenses for Andrade. And it feels like a lose-lose. Like to hardcore boxing fans, we might all give Andrade props, obviously if he beats Janibek. But in terms of this is what I could see happening even if Andrade takes this fight and even if Andrade wins this fight. When somebody is like seen to be a boogeyman, right, and they're undefeated, but we don't know too much about them because we haven't seen them fight like the top competition, it's almost like that mystique that was around them totally gets shattered. Like Victor Ortiz when he lost to Maidana, or you name it. We've seen it time and time again. There's somebody who looks like, damn, they're looking really, really good, and then when they get just broken off, like it's like, oh, they weren't nothing to begin with. That's almost like the unconscious perception. And so I feel like if Janibek loses to Andrade, then it's going to be more of people kind of salting and shading Janibek's abilities than boosting and affirming and acknowledging Andrade's accomplishment. I kind of think that that's what would happen because you could ask the question, well, who was Janibek anyway? Who did he beat? You know, so people would, I think, like hold that against Andrade, which is messed up, because like if we're talking today and we're talking like expectations and perceptions, none of these guys want to fight Janibek because we don't know how good or not good he is. But he's looking like foot feints. Like his feet are so educated that he's doing this bounce, and he's drawing a reaction based on his two legs at a time bouncing. He's a pretty sophisticated fighter who just happens to hit hard as hell. Oh, sorry. Lost audio. How are we now? Are we good? Check. Okay, thank you. Yeah, what I was saying beforehand was Andrade, I think, will more likely than not get the credit versus Andrade getting the credit over beating Janibek. I think we'll more or less have that hindsight 2020. Oh, well, who was Janibek anyway? I think that will be the narrative, even if Andrade accepts and wins the fight. I feel like it would be more like a, who the hell is Janibek? Who has he beaten? But regardless of what we say after the fact, what people have to remember and keep in mind is today, like the perceptions and the way that we look at the fighters today, Janibek is currently the boogeyman. So however his career unfolds going forward, you can't forget about how he was perceived when the WBO announced the fight between, ordered, not announced, but ordered the fight between Andrade and Janibek, right? So again, Andrade just can't catch a break, but it's almost like if Andrade cannot, within a couple weeks, secure something big, and I don't know how he would do it now if he hasn't been able to do it for the past several years, but if he can't secure anything big, he might have to do this. Like, do you think that he should fight the boogeyman of the division, Janibek Alim Kanuli, or... And by the way, I think I was muted when I was talking about Janibek's foot feint. I was saying that some people feint with their head, some feint with their hands, some feint with their shoulders, with their, at their waist. Janibek is so good. He's got this foot feint where he, if you rewatch his fight against Danny Dignam, he's doing the foot feint and drawing a reaction. Very sophisticated stuff. But yeah, do you think that Andrade should defend the title against Janibek or just move up to 168 and see if he could find something better? I kind of think that doesn't need to, but I feel like this is his best opportunity to make a splash. And granted, some people might front on him even if he picks up the win, but I just don't know what else attractive is out there for him. Not that fighting Janibek is all that attractive either. Let's see. But yeah, so the WBO ordered that fight. Also on the Usyk versus Joshua 2 undercard, Philip Hrgovic versus Zhang Jie Li has been remade. Remember they scheduled it before, then they had to postpone it. It's being remade, and it's going to be on the Usyk versus Joshua 2 undercard. Also, just announced Callum Smith versus Matthew Bauderlique out of France. That it's supposed to be a WBC title eliminator at 175. that fight was just announced, and it's going to be also on the Usyk versus Joshua 2 undercard. So the card's stacking up pretty nicely. I like that Hrgovic versus Zhang fight. L. Anthony's in the house. What's going on? Who do I think is the next real deal at middleweight? Right now, I mean, I'd have to say Janibek. Right now, if I had to say who do I think in 2 years' time is going to be holding a title, like unless he moves up, of course, I would say Janibek, Aleem Kanuli. You know, I would say, and by the way, do you mean next up as in not even a contender right now? Because you could also say Jaime Munguia, but he hasn't shown like a strong willingness to fight the best. And then, you know, there's Carlos Adames, who recently beat Sergey Derevianchenko. But if I had to guess today, I would say Janibek. Right now, he's looking the scariest in the division to me. Let me know if you guys think another guy is kind of the best up-and-comer at 160. And are you still a prospect if you're the Ring ranked number 5 guy? Is that still considered a prospect, or are you then a contender? Because I almost look at it still being a contender, or I'm sorry, a prospect, unless you've at least beaten a couple guys who we know are pretty good. Which, you know, to his credit, Aleem Kanuli, Janibek, has beaten Rob Brandt, Hassan Endam, and I guess those would be like the only 2 names that he's beaten, even though they're both like either not that good, or in the case of Endam, past their prime. Finns, 1993. Who are my top 3 all-time boxers? Any division? That's tough. Okay, how about this? How about if we say from 1960 onward? Like, so from 1960 to now. So I'll basically stop at the Sugar Ray Robinson stage, and then just go forward from there and look at the top 3. Matter of fact, let me actually get back to you. I'm going to think about that as I continue this, because I don't want to just shoot out the hip. I assume Floyd should be one of those top 3. I think that would Muhammad Ali be? I mean, Joe Louis, if we're talking all time, including like the 30s, you know, Joe Louis would be in my top 3. I know that they're the Henry Armstrongs and the guys who people normally put up there. But yeah, I got to give that one a little bit of thought, actually. That's a good question. It's always a tough question too. And I feel like those who just answer that like off the top, I don't think that they're even giving it the full breadth of thought. You know, that's a tough one. Let me know in the comments who you guys think are the top 3 all-time boxers, if you have your own top 3. Jay Foreman says, I can go back and forth on Andrade. I do feel bad for him, but he could have done things to get a better fight. I agree Munguia and Oscar are acting like jokers right now. Yeah, you know, with Andrade, I think that when he first came to middleweight, because he was good at 154. Remember, he was a title holder there. He had a fight scheduled with Jermell Charlo, and he pulled out. So there were different things that he did at 154 that I found questionable. And then when he first came to 160, well, I don't know. I don't even know if I could fault him. It depends on whether you're buying into the narrative that he's either asking for too much money, asking for things to be negotiated a certain way. But I remember when Golovkin was, you know, the reigning champ, or the most renowned champ. I think Kid Chocolate might have held the belt at the time. Probably around the time Kid Chocolate stopped Daniel Jacobs. Remember that knockout? But I remember Billy Joe Saunders was a major player at middleweight, title holder. But Andrade was calling names out then, you know, before he even earned a belt. He was calling names out at 160. So it's been going on for some time. EK says, Ali, 1,000 times better than Joe Louis, man. Come on. No, okay, so different times. Well, I can't say that. I think Ali, I really can't say that. If you look at Joe Louis's title reign and just the frequency in the fights, right? Like these days, for instance, your up-and-comers might fight 3 to 5 times a year if they're just starting their career, 3 to 5 times a year. Your champions, though, if they're really active, they're fighting 2 to 3 times. If they're not very active, sometimes they're just fighting once. Joe Louis was coming from an era where, well, skill, but okay, by that same argument, if we're talking about skills, then you would basically always favor the newer fighter. It's like if you're talking NBA basketball, the game is always evolving. Fighting is always evolving. For the UFC, for instance, like the guys today, of course, they would have beaten the guys in the 90s, right? The Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock era. The game's just developed. Boxing, I would say, has developed less so because the rules are still the rules. They haven't done a ton to change things up. I mean, they changed it from 15 rounds to 12 rounds, for title fights. But not a whole lot has changed rules-wise in boxing. But yeah, skill set wise, yeah, Ali was quicker. He was, but I mean, you could say Tyson Fury maybe beats Muhammad Ali. You could I'm not gonna come out and say that right now. I don't know if that's the case, but you can make an argument that it's possible because of the skill sets, because of the sizes. Like Big George Foreman was 6'3", right? Big George Foreman, 6'3". That he would have been dang near a Bridgerweight today, right? He would have been like 225 to 235, especially when he was younger. Joe Frazier was what, 5'11", 200 pounds, 210 maybe? Joe Frazier would have been one of the smallest heavyweights in the division. The small heavyweights of today were still bigger than Joe Frazier. So it's tough comparing eras, but if you look at the dominion, just the dominance over their respective eras, it's hard to find a better guy than Joe Louis. Whose boxing style do I enjoy watching the most right now? Mine is Usyk and Duran Ennis, says T-Smack. There are a few, like, who do I get excited about? Boots Ennis, certainly Boots Ennis. Virgil Ortiz Jr. He's one of my favorite. Ever since I saw him destroy Mauricio Herrera, which, by the way, I'm about to do a preview video on his up-and-coming fight versus Michael McKinson. That should be in a couple days. Not the fight, but the preview video. The fight's going to be next weekend, after this coming weekend, next weekend. But I like Virgil Ortiz's style a lot. I like Artur Beterbiev's style. I like Beterbiev's style a lot. I mean, how can you not like his style, right? He's just coming in and destroying people with two-fisted attacks, throwing short hooks with both hands. I love it. Jaime Munguia doesn't have the prettiest style, but it is super destructive. It's not sweet science. I mean, he's getting better just pure boxing-wise. When Jamal Charlo was clicking, I like watching Jamal Charlo when he was like knocking out Julian J. Rock Williams. I really liked him. Sebastian Fundora, he's just kind of a must-see kind of attraction just because of how much of a physical anomaly he is. But let's see, who else, like, fight style-wise? Gervonta Davis, like, to me, totally must-see. I like Teofimo Lopez. Like, his style is just, he's got shocking punching power. Blitz, just blinding hand speed. He can knock you out with the left hook and with the straight right. He's a beautiful counter puncher. So, yeah, a lot of those 135 guys, Vasily Lomachenko, who is a little Usyk-like, right? I mean, they're both trained by Anatoly Lomachenko. So I like their styles as well. Yeah, Jesse Rodriguez, Bam, he's fun to watch. Let's see. One other thing I also wanted to get into was, Maurice Hooker. Let me know if you care about this one or not. Maurice Hooker, they just announced, is going to be fighting Blair the Flair Cobbs, the guy who just got knocked out by Alexi Rocha. He's actually about to fight Maurice Hooker on the Virgil Ortiz Jr. versus Michael McKinson undercard. Interesting matchup. Also, Tevin Farmer versus Mickey Bay was just rescheduled for August 12th. So, yeah, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. They're saying Haney versus Kambosos 2 is possible for October. I'm not going to make too much of that until it's announced. Haney's saying, oh, they're lying. I didn't agree to nothing. That's what he just said on Twitter after they said it looks like it's going to be October 16. I'm not going to make too much of that. Jay Foreman said Mauricio Lara. Yeah, he's super fun to watch too. Yeah, Mauricio Lara, absolutely. EK said, imagine Tank versus Tio. What a great underrated fight. Yeah, and around the time Tio beat Vasily Lomachenko, that was one of those dream matches that we've been wanting at 135 for some time. But boxing is just, it's as likely to disappoint you as it is to, fulfill your boxing fantasy and to see the dream matches that you want to see take place. Let's see. Stan Tucker said, "Who are the three most entertaining boxers of all time?" That's a tough one. For me, okay, was Roy Jones Jr. among the most entertaining? Because for a while he was, but then he started to play it safe and he started to say, well, if I don't have to get hit, why should I get hit? That kind of became a thing during Roy Jones Jr.'s career. Even when he was just continuing his undefeated streak, going from 168 to 175 and earning belts there and beating just about everybody, he started getting less exciting because you knew what you were tuning in for. It would just be like 12 rounds to 0 or like a late round stoppage, but he wasn't going to put his foot on the gas. For me, Roberto Duran, super entertaining to watch. Thomas the Hitman Hearns has got to be up there. Sugar Ray Leonard, to me, has to be up there. For me, Shane Mosley has to be up there. I don't know if it's top 3, but Shane Mosley, I feel like his career was recent enough where I don't feel like there's enough mention on how special of a puncher that guy was. Shane Mosley, rewatch Shane Mosley versus Antonio Margarito, rewatch Oscar De La Hoya versus Shane Mosley the first time they fought, and then watch Shane Mosley's his title defenses right after he won the belt. He fought Adrian Stone and Shannon Taylor. Watch the first round of Mosley versus Shannon Taylor and look at that right hand that he hits Taylor with towards the end of the first round. Only a puncher like Shane Mosley or, other guys who have lethal right hands, Tommy Hearns, Deontay Wilder, could hit somebody like that and so blindingly fast too. And Shane Mosley would do this thing where he would put together an 8-punch combination and the whole combination would take a couple seconds to happen. He was punching that quickly. It's just a shame that he ran into Vernon Forrest twice. That ended his pound for pound dominance. Rest in peace to Vernon Forrest as well. Stan Tucker says Chavez. Yeah, Chavez would have to be up there as well. It's really tough to narrow it down to 3, but Chavez would be there. I mean, if you want something that's like only this guy can pull this off, Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. No, he wasn't the most offensive fighter, but he's the only guy that you'll see ever that I've seen do what he was doing. Even Floyd Mayweather's style of defense was much different than Sweet Pea Whitaker's. Sweet Pea Whitaker could stand right in front of you, right in your punching range, and you could throw 4 to 6 punches and miss with every one of them. Floyd's was his construct, also his reflexes, but it was his construct and then his ability to read the offense and then react. Whereas, again, there's certain people who are built with the reflexes of a fly, basically, and that was Pernell Whitaker. So maybe not the most entertaining from an offensive standpoint, but definitely one of those, oh my God, you have to see this guy types of things. Manny Pacquiao versus Manny Pacquiao, whoever, he's in all of those discussions. Most entertaining, top, he's in just about any discussion. And I just saw T-Smack say that Manny would probably beat Duran. I remember my dad, he's in the house, Stan Tucker, said several years ago when I was asking him, Manny Pacquiao or Roberto Duran, who would win? And then I think he said Manny Pacquiao. And this is before, well, I don't know. This is probably when Pacquiao was just running roughshod at 147 when he had beaten, when he had won the De La Hoya mega fight, right? And then he knocked out Ricky Hatton, beat Miguel Cotto, beat Josh Clottey, Antonio Margarito, and just kind of down the list. When he was on that rampage was, I think, around the time we had that discussion. Yeah, Hector Macho Camacho. Yeah, good call. Good call, yeah. Camacho was supremely entertaining. I actually need to rewatch more of his fights. I rewatched a lot of them. Unfortunately, I was a kid when he fought Julio Cesar Chavez, and at the time, that was one of those mega fights that that was super long awaited, and it felt like a super fight the way that they were advertising. I remember looking in newspapers and seeing how big the ad was for that fight, and I think Chavez at the time was 80-something and 0, something crazy like that. And Camacho was had tons of wins and maybe 1 loss or something. But Yeah, that was like a mega fight, and then Chavez just beat the hell out of Camacho, beat the hell out of Camacho. And I remember Camacho's face being so fattened up, and in the post-fight interview, I think it went the distance. I think it went the distance. Again, I was like maybe 9, 10 years old at the time, but all I remember was Camacho saying, "It's still macho time," like, you know, gesturing to the crowd because that was like his catchphrase. But he was like, "It's still macho time," and that was after just getting obliterated by Chavez. Yeah, but Manny Pacquiao versus Duran. So I'm assuming that you're saying at 135, right? Even though Manny Pacquiao only had one lightweight fight, and that was against David Diaz. Remember, he basically skipped 135. He fought once, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I have this one right. He fought once at 135 and then went up again, and that was after he was just killing it at 130 and then 126 and so on before that. But yeah, Pacquiao versus Duran at 135, that's tough. Because Pacquiao did lose at, where did he fight Morales the first time? Was that 126 or 130? I feel like it was 126 when he lost that close fight to Eric Morales. So, he was beatable. And Duran, if you look at Duran's career at 135, he might be the greatest lightweight of all time. He's on the short list. People will say maybe Shane Mosley, maybe. Oscar De La Hoya was fantastic at 135. The way that he beat up on Ruelas and Gennaro Chicanito Hernandez, even though he was aging at the time. But Duran, I think Duran could have hung with Pacquiao. Like punch output, punching power, even in boxing ability, because Pacquiao gradually got to become a better boxer over time under the tutelage of Freddie Roach. But if you watch him when he was in his lightweight classes, he looked pretty raw, and he was just coming in with hellfire in punch volume and punching speed and so forth. But I think that him versus Duran would have been very competitive. Sergio Martinez was fun to watch. Yeah, I agree, Jay Foreman. Yeah, I agree with that. Is there a better trilogy than what Gaddy and Ward had? Yeah, I think so. It was a great trilogy, but shoot, Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. I think that'll go down as an epic, historic trilogy. And is there a greater trilogy than Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier? Right? That resulted. The fight rings a bell now, and those were 15 rounders, right? So yeah, I would have to start with Ali versus Frazier, where Frazier won the first one, Ali won the second one controversially, and then Ali won the third one controversially, but for different reasons. Frazier was basically half blind in that fight. It's pretty crazy. Stan Tucker said, love Cotto, pulled against him at first, but he won me over. Yeah, and we kind of had that habit, right? We would pull against a lot of the up-and-comers that looked like they were unstoppable because we spent a lot of time watching these other veterans basically losing to a lot of these up-and-comers, and you kind of want to see the veterans that you've been watching for some time, so have their moments and hold the line, right? But yeah, Miguel Cotto was in some difficult fights at 140, and then he came up and started killing it there until he ran into a probably cheating Antonio Margarito. And by the way, it looks like Bivol versus Zordo will be the fight that happens. Again, it's not official, but it's looking like that's what's being made. As much as Eddie Hearn is trying to lobby for his guy, it's funny. Eddie Hearn will kind of undercut other promoters every chance he gets, right? So basically, they have this almost lined up between Bivol and Zordo, and then Eddie Hearn starts petitioning the WBA, saying, "Oh no, can we get Joshua Buatsi, his guy, in to take the title defense instead of and fight Bivol instead of Zordo Ramirez, which is Oscar De La Hoya's guy?" It looks like the WBA is saying, "Nah, it ain't happening." So it looks like what Eddie's gonna do with Joshua Buatsi is, it looks like they might make Joshua Buatsi versus Jean Pascal. Pascal just beat Meng Fenglong in a difficult fight. And it's amazing that Jean Pascal, at this age, he's 40 plus now, is still beating good fighters. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be Buatsi versus Jean Pascal. And then it looks like Dimitri Bivol will indeed fight Zordo Ramirez. But again, until they make that fight official, this is speculation, but it looks like that's where the narratives and the reports that we're seeing are trending towards. And it also looks like Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall it might get made specifically for November 26th, and that would be in Glasgow, Scotland. So that would be a spectacle, and it's crazy. And I felt a little bad even before this Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall fight, because as good as Jack Catterall is, like, I felt like he wasn't getting the props that he deserved, and was still such a name that was flying below the radar after his close win against Regis Prograis, and then certainly after his win against Jose Ramirez. He still wasn't getting, a casual fan boxing love. It was still only the hardcores, at least here in the States, that were aware of how good Josh Taylor is. By the way, do you guys have any picks for Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. coming up this weekend? This is, again, Danny Garcia's debut at 154. And if you haven't, by the way, like the video. I always forget to say that. Smash that like button, because I know when you're in a chat, like, you're looking at the actual chat, which is what I do, and sometimes I forget. It's like, oh shoot, I've got to like X out of here, like the thing, and then hop back in the chat. But yeah, I always forget. Usually, MAW, who's usually a guest in here, will put a reminder out in the chat, hey, smash that like button or something, which I always appreciate. But Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez about to take place this weekend. And then on the undercard, which I want to get into just a little bit here. But first, before we get into Gary Antoine Russell versus Rances Barthélemy, I just want to talk a little bit about one of the other Russell brothers and how good he might be. Let me get to some of what you guys are saying in here, because I saw a lot of good ideas and potential fights. Yeah, Cotto fought everybody as many. Yeah, Cotto was fighting them all. He was of that Oscar De La Hoya ilk, where he'll just fight anybody. I loved Miguel Cotto's career. And Old Morales versus Maidana. Yeah, Old Morales fought Maidana, but even more brutal than that, which was a great fight, yeah. And it's crazy to think that Morales fought Maidana, right? As small and skinny as Morales was when he was at like 122, 118 before that, then 126. It's crazy that Morales, and 130, was fighting Marcos Maidana. And it's also crazy that Morales continued to fight and fought Danny Garcia twice. That's unbelievable. like what the hell are you doing, Eric? But that just shows you the kind of attitude that he had towards fighting anybody. Do I have any up and coming boxers to look out for? Ammo Williams would have been one of them. Xander Zayas, he fights with Top Rank on ESPN. In fact, he's usually on the Edgar Berlanga undercards. Xander Zayas, and usually Benny Bronx will shout him out in this in the chat. But yeah, Xander Zayas, Ammo Williams, who took a mental health break from the sport momentarily. Those are two that I would start with. Even though Ammo obviously kind of hit a snag. I'll tell you who was looking like they might shape up to be, although I was skeptical from the jump. And this kid just fought on last week's Top Rank card on the Isaac Dogboe, Joey Gonzalez undercard. And that's Gabriel Flores Jr., who just lost again. So now he's lost twice. And I think that I don't think he's going to have a good pro career. I'll just come out and say it. Some guys you can see when they have it, and because sometimes the hype train gets ahead of itself and the promoter starts getting it, working on building the fighter's name and, like preaching to the highest mountain that this kid is the future. And then you just see that they don't have the goods. And that looks like it's the case with Gabriel Flores Jr. And it really just is what it is. It's, Gabe Flores, he did go up a division a little bit early. Some people thought that he should stay at 130, but he ended up going to 135 and losing a second fight. So it looks like that hype train is like totally derailed, and it's going to be interesting to see how long he continues pursuing a pro boxing career. And it's crazy how quickly those things could happen. One day you're on top, next day anything could happen, and all of a sudden they're just wondering like, hey, do you have anything left in the tank? But yeah, those are a couple up and comers that I would mention, and there's several others. I mean, you know, you've got Raymond Ford, you've got Troy Isley, and right now I'm just kind of picking from some of the last like Olympic crop, for instance. Raymond Ford was looking really. Oh, who's that one who Errol Spence is managing right now? Frank Martin, who just fought a couple weeks ago and beat a good fighter. Oh yeah, he stopped Jackson Marinez. Frank Martin looks like he might be a very, very good fighter. I like, again, Alexi Rocha, whose one loss is against Rashidi Ellis. Rashidi Ellis, that's another guy up and coming to look out for. Rashidi Ellis, the guy he beat, Alexi Rocha, who, again, beat Blair the Flair Cobbs. Those are all some very good kind of prospects, you know, and not too far from being contenders. It doesn't take much to go from prospect turn contender. You have to get a little bit lucky or have the right guys backing you to put you on the right undercards, right platforms to go from prospect to contender. You know, we've seen it on the PBC side with like Stanionis and Butayev, and, you know, with Virgil Ortiz Jr. on the zone. Thanks, Fins 1993. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, man. So on this undercard, Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. undercard, there's also Gary Antoine Russell versus Rances Barthelemy. Now, Barthelemy is a multi-divisional champ, right? We've seen him fight. Some of us have seen him fight Robert Easter Jr. He fought him to a draw. So Barthelemy has fought Easter to a draw, and his loss before that was against Carol Relic, where he beat Relic the first time via decision, and then he lost to Relic via decision. Relic is the guy who Regis Prograis beat for the 140-pound title. So Rances Barthelemy is trying to become a 3-division champion. He's also a Cuban fighter, but he's about to fight Gary Russell Jr.'s brother, Gary Antoine Russell, who just a few months ago in February became the first to beat, the first to stop Victor Postal. So Gary Antoine Russell looks like he might be the next person that we need to know about in the division. He doesn't have the same blinding Gary Russell Jr. hand speed, but he does have more power, it seems, and he's got kind of more of a come forward style. He's hunting you out there. He's not somebody who's going to wait for you to come in and then just blitz you with 3-4 punches and then move. Gary Antoine Russell is more of a come forward fighter, and again, he stopped Victor Postal. So this is going to be another step up fight this coming weekend for Gary Antoine, and it's going to take place again against a 2-division champ, Rances Barthelemy, who's trying to put himself in a position to capture another title in a 3rd division. So yeah, I just actually made a preview video on that fight like a couple days ago. Check that out if you get a chance. Also, I wanted to make just quick mention on Floyd Mayweather's comment on the potential Tank versus Ryan Garcia fight. Now, this is all politicking here, but Floyd said, yeah, we can make this happen before the end of this year. So at least he's kind of getting involved verbally, whereas usually Mayweather Promotions, usually through Leonard Ellerby, isn't even mentioning these other guys that we want to see Ryan Garcia fight, that we want to see Teofimo Lopez, or who we want to see, Gervonta Davis fight, right? Usually they're not even acting like these other guys exist. And, you know, it's all about Rolly Romero. No, that's the guy. That's the guy who's a opponent that matters. Leo Santa Cruz, Mario Barrios. Well, at least now we have Floyd Mayweather talking about the fight. But in doing so, he's also negotiating, saying that it has to be at 135. Now, Ryan Garcia said he never wants to come back to 135. He's fought his last 2 fights now at 140. Both against small fighters. Both of the guys that he fought, by the way, were never 140 fighters. Like Javier Fortuna, at biggest, he's a 135 guy. And at best, he was a 126 guy. Emmanuel Tego, another lightweight, 135, who fought Ryan Garcia at 140. Ryan Garcia is close. He's like 5'10", 5'11", so he's got the build to support to properly support that additional weight. So Garcia said he doesn't want to come back to 135, but he said that if Tank wants to fight him, come see him at 140. So they're already kind of jockeying for a position there. But who do you guys see as the A-side fighter here? I see it as being Gervonta Tank Davis. And being that Gervonta Tank Davis should be the A-side fighter because he is a multiple division belt holder, even though it's only one of those divisions that I looked at as being a legitimate belt, and that would have been down at 130 when he beat Jose Pedraza. I don't count the stuff at 135 and 140 in terms of the belts that he's held. But he's a former champion. He's sold more pay-per-views. Like, he's done like 3 or 4 pay-per-views now. So you would think that he's the A-side fighter. But it's almost like Oscar and Ryan Garcia, which they do have a star on their hands. Let's not get it twisted. Ryan Garcia is a star, but so is Gervonta Davis. So they would have to work out the split, and they'd have to come to agreement on who is the A side, who is the B side. I don't know who's going to bend there. I get the impression that Floyd Mayweather and Mayweather Promotions are not going to bend there. And I also suspect that they are not going to bend on the weight. I think that Gervonta Davis has a much better shot against Ryan Garcia up at 140 instead of 135. I'm sorry, no. I think that Tank has a better chance at 135. Sorry about that. Tank's got a better chance being the smaller guy at 135, and I think that the fight taking place at 140, which is what Ryan Garcia is calling for, I think that favors Ryan Garcia. Not that I would make him the favorite, but I think that works to his advantage. So you're starting to see the promoters start negotiating publicly. So that at least shows you that they have a higher level of interest in the fight than they did before. But I also kind of suspect that this could possibly just be both of them promoting their own respective fights, using the other guy as like a talking point to build their own fight. So as Ryan Garcia starts to promote his next fight, keep Gervonta Davis' name in his mouth. That just makes it bigger and bigger and more interesting. Same thing with Gervonta Davis and being asked questions about Ryan Garcia. It just makes more people want to say, wait, what? And pay attention to what's going on. So I hope I'm wrong there. I hope that they are going to negotiate this fight in good faith, and that they just don't throw, a hard line saying it's either this way or nothing, and then both guys walk away from the table, because then we won't get that fight next. Which, if I had to guess whether it's a greater or less percent than 50%, or a greater or less chance than 50% that this fight gets made next, I would still place it at lower than 50%. And that's just unfortunate. But that also tells you about the business of boxing, unfortunately. I don't want to end this on such a bad note, but yeah, we're going to run in a bit. I want to thank you guys, like always, for dropping by, man. I love these live chats. This time we got into some, all-time conversation, which, we could go division by division. Me and my boy Hot Facts with Robert Reese, who was in the house earlier, we were doing a little bit of that a couple weeks ago. We're going to do another show probably in a couple of weeks. I'll put the preview out, or at the, the thumbnail, and, I guess that would be the preview once that's scheduled, basically. But it looks like we're about to do that in a couple of weeks. Yeah, calling out guys from lower weight classes. It's just frustrating because you see what's going on in the boxing public. But the thing is, the boxing business also works in a way where no fighter is being penalized for not fighting in the fights that matter. Like, I wish that we could basically boycott the fighters, and not because I don't want to see the fighters make money. I want to see them make every penny that they can make in the sport. Super dangerous sport. But I more so want to punish the promoters. I just don't know how you do that. The way that you would do that is boycotting a fight because the promoter isn't giving the fans the fights that they want. So it's not about boycotting Gervonta Davis. It would be about boycotting PBC just with Davis fights, right? Because I think that they're doing a good job, for instance, with Jermell Charlo. They just happen to have all the guys in that division, right? So Jermell Charlo can fight a whole bunch of good fights since all those good fighters at 154 are with PBC. With Oscar De La Hoya, if Virgil Ortiz doesn't get like a very good fight in his next fight or two, I would say, boycott Virgil Ortiz Jr. fights. Not because you don't like Virgil Ortiz Jr., but just because his promoter, Golden Boy, isn't doing what he needs to do to get Virgil Ortiz in the fights that matter. And Virgil Ortiz right now is campaigning at 147, and next he's going to campaign at 154. Both of those divisions, Oscar, you know who you need to talk to. You gotta talk with PBC, Al Heyman, whoever, and get that done. But I just wish that there was a way to hold promoters accountable for not giving the fans what they want. But yeah, thank you guys once again for coming through. T-Smack, Jay Foreman, Fins 1993. By the way, guys, yeah, there are a couple previews that I just put out. I put out a Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. preview, as well as a Gary Antoine Russell versus Rancis Barthélemy, and a Adam Kownacki versus Ali Demirizin. We did the previews for those three. Yeah, Stan Tucker, thanks for coming through. EK, thank you for coming through. GWK, yeah, sorry I didn't shout you out on the way in. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Seaweave Lyrical, thank you once again. T-Smack, Marco, SCLA, thank you guys. I know Benji was in here earlier, Benjamin Tucker, Baso Man or Basso Man. Yeah, thank you, Jay. Heck yeah, appreciate you. And you always give like good commentary as well in the comments and in these chats. Love it. Brandon Jackson, thanks again. Yeah, until next time. Yeah, so last weekend it was a little bit sparse in terms of the boxing action, even though we did get a really good fight in Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogboe. It's really interesting, and I'm going to keep my eye on the featherweight division, seeing who they match Dogboe up against next. But yeah, we got a couple of good fights coming up this weekend, and then the calendar starts picking up again. So yeah, stay tuned, and yeah, I hope that some good news breaks in terms of the fights that we want to see getting made, hopefully. But yeah, thanks again for commenting. Drop a like if you haven't, and yeah, I'm Wood. Thanks again. Until next time, guys. Peace. Brexley, thank you. Yeah, Benjamin Tucker and Brexley in the house. Thanks once again. Love you guys.